Well, it's time to move forward and move this assembly forward, and of course, it's time for my report. On pages 9 to 11 in the Bulletin of Reports, you can find my written report, which probably, I believe, rivals the length of the bishop's, and I apologize for that. And I'd like to share some thoughts with you tonight. Although it's really tempting to look backward, considering the year that we're in, I think that might be a little dangerous, and I'd actually like to spend some time talking with you about moving forward. As some of you may be familiar with, but others may not, I am actually a layperson. I am not a clergy, and so I'm speaking to you from that position. I'm going to start with a little story tonight. So our property is lined on 1.5 sides with an old tree line that was planted, my goodness, probably generations ago, to both break the wind and, of course, establish a property line, a boundary line between two neighboring farms, my family's farmland and, of course, that of our neighbors. The marquee of the tree line is a majestic white oak. It's flanked on either side by a sturdy collection of some maples and some shagbark hickories, and punctuated here and there by a few remains of dead ash trees that succumbed to the borers. And the understory, of course, has a bunch of volunteer mulberry plants that I detest, but the birds adore. Reliably and predictably, this tree line does its thing year after year, leafing out each spring and providing food and shelter to any of the species that will have it throughout the year. But it's old, and admittedly, it's been benignly neglected. Left to do its thing over the years, but admittedly, it's calling out that it really needs some care. It looks okay from a distance, but up close you can really see that the established trees have some breakage. Some of the younger trees are doing well, but there are some others that are struggling. And beneath it all, among the wildflowers and grasses, there are a few masses of some tangled, thorny mess and a small pile of junky old tires left over from somebody else. Maybe like you, I was determined to use my COVID quarantine time productively, and I set my sights on revitalizing a tree line. And it's a project I'd had in the back of my head for a few years. Digging in the dirt brings me peace, and I'd planted quite a few trees on the property already a few years before to great success. Why should this year be any different? With optimism and spirit and a full budget, I sprung to action on the internet and I bought fancy organic heirloom trees listed by their scientific names from a fancy nursery in California. They arrived at not an insignificant cost, please don't tell my husband, but they were sturdy specimens that never managed to leaf out very well. Recognizing I might need a few extra trees to supplement this project, I spied a couple of beautiful young basswood saplings that happened to be growing on my friend's wooded property as we took a walk together, socially distanced. Of course, they were in a location that I felt was a little less than ideal and asked, could I dig them up? Oh, I should have left them where they were. Undeterred, I brought home 4 more trees from a 4-H fundraiser. They were lovingly planted, only to be accidentally mowed over. I'm kind of sure their future was heading in the same direction as their predecessors, but yeah, it was merciful. Then we got 10 free trees from the Arbor Day Foundation order. No, we didn't. They never showed up. And I suspect that was, in fact, a blessing for them. Or they knew the fate they had in store on my property and heaved themselves off of the delivery truck. Having nothing to lose, I Googled how to make your own trees and learned about the magic and science of propagation. Propagation is growing a new plant specimen, a baby tree, from a young growth of an older tree. Armed with some new knowledge and never say die spirit, 30 cuttings and rooting hormone, I thought perhaps. I'd love to say I had some kind of magical successful outcome, and the story ends up with a veritable forest of new growth on our side acre. But the truth is, those potential baby trees right now are little more than sticks in a box right now, and I really won't know if I've had any success until late spring of 2021. I do, however, on a few of those sticks, see the tiniest signs of new growth. Some new buds here, a couple of really minuscule new leaves there, but they give me hope. So why did I just spend half of my time talking about trees? Because it struck me how much my history and current relationship with trees is so much like the history and current situation of our churches and synod. For me and my trees, and for Lutherans and our churches, growth used to come easily. Plant it and it will grow. Some trees and churches even planted themselves with no help from anybody else, really. We have our mature, majestic oaks of churches planted in the downtowns of Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton, Reading. Our sturdy church maples and hickories among towns and countrysides from the border of New York to the border of Berks County. But like some other trees in my line, we also know that we have churches who are struggling for space and place and even life. And we too have tangles and messes beneath it all created and left behind for us to clean up. And growth? Well, I've actually gleaned some wisdom about growth from my trees that I'd like to share with you. For one thing, new growth right now, for a combination of reasons both identified and mysterious, is happening, but it isn't always happening easily. But when we look closely, it is happening. We have New Starts grants going to Common Ground Recovery Community and campuses in Wyomissing and Reading, and also to Hope's Table in Reading. Cafe Esperanza in Reading received a domestic hunger grant for its ministry, and our congregations all across our synod continue to develop new ways of serving their own communities in these challenging times. Still, the reality is we are working on the larger struggle of decline in the church. And this takes some real doing on our parts. Some optimism, research, grit, making difficult decisions, patience, some tears perhaps, and a lot of faith. This is a time we must all have a very real awareness that synod life of the future is not synod life we knew then or that we even know now. There are realities that we must all contend with. Yet I invite you to be optimistic, because every day God gives us new reason for hopes, however small they may appear to us right now. Secondly, we need to spend far more time nurturing that new growth than we may be used to, using different strategies and resources than we initially planned. We may find our first few tries at growth fail us or produce results that fall short of our initial vision. And who hasn't at some point exhausted their budget on fancy when the best option all along was much simpler? I invite all of us, myself included, to keep on trying. COVID has really forced many of us in this direction, right? From those first shaky weeks when the doors closed to our churches to the multiple formats we get to worship in today, it all had to be nurtured week by week and tweak by tweak. And as a synod with a new bishop, we will very likely be re-experiencing the same feeling as we learn anew how to do this dance together. But with patience, resourcefulness, and resilience, we will grow. Third, we need to acknowledge our old expectations are not serving us anymore, if they are even serving us at all. Yes, maybe success did happen by doing it one way in the past, but as the world changes, is it reasonable to expect that we will always achieve the same results if we don't change along with the world? I invite you to challenge your thinking every time you begin to think, well, in the past, or it was so much better when, because we're not there. And time isn't going backward, no matter how hard we wish it. But being here now, it isn't so bad. It's just different. And different really is okay, even if we're not used to it and we don't feel comfortable. Because what is God nudging us to do through this discomfort? What is God saying to us that is next? What's coming? Or are we too busy straining our ears to listen for the echoes of what was? Fourth, like my tree line, neglect, even benign neglect, is not a strategy for the long term. Growth that is meant for enduring legacy requires attention to all the trees, to all the churches, and it requires caretaking. And we are and must be those caretakers, not just in our own church buildings, fixing broken hinges or repairing leaky windows. I mean taking care of each other as congregations, as people. I invite you to see the church body in the larger scope. You know, the bishop mentioned something very interesting in his report. He said he wishes that all clergy could have a chance to be bishop. I wish that all lay people had a chance to serve with the synod. Did you know our synod is 251 congregations and 3 synod authorized worshiping communities strong? That's a mouthful. You may not feel it in your little corner of the synod or on your couch, but you know, that's a lot of churches. And it gives us one of the largest voting delegations at Churchwide Assembly. We are a strong synod, but we can only be as strong as our desire to be caretakers of each other and our collective resources. You are all equipped and perfect, just as you are to serve. Maybe you are thinking about a change or looking for a way to get involved, and this is my invitation to you to consider living out your faith in a broader scope by looking at opportunities to serve our congregations as a part of the synod. Maybe perhaps on council or on a committee. I am proof that you don't need to be somebody special. You just need to be asked. And this is me asking you. Finally, we must share our caretaking skills with the younger generations and let those new caretakers get their hands dirty too. And we must let new approaches to caretaking be tried, even if it means failure. We learn from failure, especially if we let ourselves face challenges in spite of the possibility of failure, and encourage ourselves and each other to work through it and even laugh at it. Because learning through failure imparts very important and essential growth that helps us continue to navigate all of this change. And this is my most urgent invitation of the night: growing young. On November 10th and 11th, our synod will host Growing Young in a Changing World, and it's a virtual summit, and everyone who's tuning in tonight and beyond can join us. Have you watched again and again as your youth leave from church after they have affirmed their baptism? Or maybe you only have youth who attend youth group, but they're not part of your larger congregation. Does your congregation have a gap of people who are missing from their 20s and their 30s? And if you see any of these as a problem that your church needs to address, guess what? We've got a book and a forum for you to really learn. This is being done with our synod, and you can register for this right out on our webpage. Again, that's November 10th and 11th. That's coming up right around the corner. Please take advantage of this, because this is a very important mission. It's vital to our growth as a synod. Encouraging new growth is a labor of love and persistence, and where the new growth occurs and needs to occur, not just within our churches and congregations, it needs to occur within ourselves too. Leaves may be turning brown outside, but we are preparing for a time of new growth here at the synod. We will be electing a new bishop together, and we will have new synod council and committee members, and we will have new ideas and possibilities, and we will need some different strategies, and we'll need to let go of the old expectations that are no longer serving us. And I'm calling on all of you to be caretakers for NEPA's synod's legacy by taking action now for its future. I know many of you already here are already a part of the assembly, but I'm also calling on you to teach somebody else your caretaking skills. And where you might just find yourself stepping in to make sure something or someone doesn't fail, if they don't do things exactly as you've always done them, just want to invite you to take a pause, take a break, just stop for a moment and let the new caretaker try something. And if there's failure, well, I hope there's also some laughter, but there may also be success in a new way that you may not be expecting. And that's exciting, and that's growth, and that's something that we all need to nurture. I'd like to end with a quick prayer. Milagroso, Waymaker, help us make way for new growth. Abre Camino, Miracle Worker. We know the greatest miracle workers are yours, but help us work steadily to make great things happen in our synod and beyond. Cumples Promesas, Promise Keeper, help us keep our promise to you and remain faithful to your word. Luz en Tinieblas, Light in the darkness, help us bring light and growth to all that we care for, and instill in us an ability to share your word with others, so that others may also feel the hope we feel as your own. Mi Dios, así eres tú. You are our God. You are the Lord of all. Guide us in being your kingdom here on earth, in welcoming the stranger, in caring for the other, in following your example, even and especially during challenging times. Help us grow new and anew, together as the Northeastern Pennsylvania Synod, and as caretakers of your word in our world. Amen.